बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम क़ालू सुब्हानक ला इल्मा लना इल्ला मा अल्लमतना इन्नका अंतल अलीमुल हकीम. We'll be discussing today intensive care unit and the things which are needed for intensive care unit and the patients which we are treating, type of the patient we are treating in intensive care unit. So, I label it as a management intricacies in intensive care unit. Now, what is the intensive care unit? Intensive care unit is a place where seriously ill, suffering more than one organ disease are admitted and treated. If it is suffering from one disease, that's the HDU patient. According to the critical situation of the patient, we divide these patients into different categories. Zero level, the patient who is coming to hospital and does not have any comorbidity, that's called zero level. And the patients undergo routine monitoring or routine care. And the other category is level 1. Level 1 is the patients who has got comorbidity, but that is stabilized and does not need any other treatment, and they are monitored for hourly and they are kept in the ward. And the third category is level 2, where one system organ is dysfunctional, that needs to be stabilized, and that's a patient for HDU. Only one exception to that is respiratory failure. Even if there is no other problem, only respiratory failure, that is a level 3 patient. Then level 3, when the more than one organ systems need to be supported or needs to be managed, that's called level 3 patient, and they are ICU patient. Then level 4. Level 4 is a specialized intensive care units like neurosurgical intensive care, cardiothoracic intensive care unit, like these burn units. So they are called level 4 ICU. Now, objective of treating the patient in intensive care is we normalize the cell physiology. Remember this word, we normalize the cell physiology. It means when the cell is affected, when cell becomes dysfunctional, it cannot be managed ordinarily in the room or in the ward. And it cannot be managed by ordinary physician. So it has to be managed by the intensivist. Then how we design the ICU? So there should be one entry and one exit of the unit. Should not be multiple entries. Right. Second is, it should be centrally located in the hospital. So it means that every ward or in every place should be, this intensive care unit should be approachable. Then minimum floor space per bed is 18.5 square meter. It means 200 square feet. It's quite a big area. But this space is needed because we have got so many machines which come near to it. We do X-rays, C-arm, and we do the procedures also. And there should be computer also on every bed. So for that thing we need a space. And then when the consultant comes and when the doctors and nurses are looking after the patient, there should be space around the patient to look after that patient. So that's why this is the area, 200 square feet. It's quite a big area. We got 160 square feet in our ICU. So if we make it 200, so we could hardly 5 or 6 patients we could accommodate. So if you go to the other ICUs, they don't care about these feet. So the beds are like if you go to Nishtar, there are how many beds are there in whole unit. So if you multiply with 200 square feet, so how much space should be needed for that? So it was badly designed. Yeah. Bed strength, a general principle is one bed of intensive care unit per 100 beds of the hospital in general. But if there are specialized units like cardiothoracic unit, then you need more bed, and according to the inflow to the different units, so we increase the beds. So generally, this is the basic principle. Now, physical design, there should be reception area. And reception area should have a reception foyer, counter of the reception. Then should be waiting area, waiting room. Then should be counseling room. And then there should be overnight relative room. And it's in Western countries, in every intensive care unit, in that area, there is 1 or 2 rooms which are for the relatives. The patient is very serious, or the patient is dying, or the patient needs to be, the condition needs to be explained to the patient's relative frequently. Or if you have to counsel them frequently, then we make them stay in those rooms, right? It's not only make them stay in the rooms, and they are served also, lunch, breakfast, and dinner also. Then patient area, multiple bed ward, as we have got, multiple bed ward, it should be open, right? Then there should be isolation rooms, there should be procedure room, and there should be central nursing station. So, almost we are fulfilling these requirements. Then there should be storage and utility area. We should have equipment area, should be area for disposable things, and then there should be area for the linen and stationery area, fluids and vascular catheter area, or you can keep in the same store also to make different portions. Then there should be clean and dirty utility areas also, right? Then monitoring, bedside and central monitors. And central monitors are discouraged. It should not be on the nursing station. Central monitor should never be there. Otherwise, the nurse will sit there. They will monitor their patient. No. So, one nurse, one patient, and they should be sitting on the bed, on the bedside. But there should be central monitor in the tea room. Because when the nurse is going for a tea, she should be looking at his or her patient also while taking the tea. Okay? But mostly it happens, even if you are sitting on the bedside, you are not looking at your patients, right? Invasive devices, all the invasive devices should be there. Cardiac output computers, EEG monitor also should be there where we are dealing with the CVA patients. Blood glucose monitors. Then in radiology, X-ray, image intensifier, and X-ray viewer. They should be there. They should be stationed out there. And we hardly use image intensifier, but we use the X-ray. That's why we have got X-ray in our intensive care unit. Then respiratory therapy. What is required for the patient who is suffering from respiratory problems? We should have ventilators. We should have humidifiers. We should have oxygen therapy devices, right? Then intubation trolley, airways devices, self-inflating resuscitator, which is commonly called Ambu bag. Ambu is the company. That should be called self-inflating resuscitator. If you press it like this, it comes back to its own shape. So that should be, in addition to those green, which we have circuits lying there on the bedside, there should be resuscitators also on the trolley. So then airway devices, so intubation trolley. Now you got the intubation trolley now, that should be all the tubes and laryngoscope and all choices there. Self-inflating resuscitator, then fiber optic bronchoscope. That should be in the hospital, in the ICU also, because you can need it anytime, right? So then anesthesia machine. At least one anesthesia machine should be in every intensive care unit, depending on the size and depending on the type of the patient you are getting in those intensive care units. It's a large number of the items there. It's the intensive care. It is not the patient who are treating in the ward. Then for cardiovascular, you should have a CPR trolley. You should have, on CPR trolley, you should have a defibrillators. Then temporary pacemaker. Then intra-aortic balloon pump. Then infusion pumps and syringe pumps. Except intra-aortic balloon pump, we have got almost everything in our ICU. Then dialytic therapy. In dialytic therapy, you got hemodialysis machine, hemofiltration machines, peritoneal dialysis machine, then continuous hemofiltration sets should be present there. So, hemodialysis machines are not required in ICU if you got hemofiltration machines there, because on the 24 hours basis, it's a low flow. You are dialyzing the patient 24 hours. So, which you are dialyzing in 4 hours, that should be done at 24 hours, because these patients are hemodynamically unstable. You cannot put them on the dialysis machines. So, but we are using our dialysis unit for our seriously patient also, because we shift the ventilators and everything over there. But it's a cumbersome thing. It's better to have these hemofiltration machines there over there. Now, unfortunately, it's very expensive, hemofiltration, hemodiafiltration, because the set only costs about 30,000 rupees. So at least 30,000 rupees for one hemofiltration for one patient. That's a disposable. So in our country, they cannot afford it, but there are some units. So when I inquired last time from the company in 2011, there was only one hemofiltration machine in Aha Hospital, and there was one they ordered one in the Shaukat Khanum, and there was no other in the whole country. Then the intensive care unit in Cardiovascular Institute, Army wala jo hai, usme unhone ek order ki thi. And that time it was the cost of the machine was 18 lakh. So now it is about 32 lakh or something like that. The price has gone up. So in laboratory, there should be one laboratory. So I actually made one laboratory in the Nistar intensive care unit, and we had a biochemist there also. The blood gas analyzer, almost we have got thromboelastograph, microscope and osmometers. They are the minimum things which should be present in the laboratory. Then hardware, you should have dressing trolley, drip stands, heating and cooling blankets, pressure mattresses, sterilizing equipment. Right? So it looks as if I'm mentioning for the whole hospital. It's for intensive care unit. Only everything should be present there. Nobody should be running around to find it to bring from another corner of the hospital. They should be present in intensive care unit. It means should be so big. So I wish I could make the whole floor like this. Yeah. But the flow of the patient, look, it's very costly thing to look after these intensive care patients. Till we are charging only 10,000 for 24 hours. Actually, this almost was 5%. There is a profit on that. So if you look at the doctor's hospital, they are about 30,000, 28 to 30,000. And this defense hospital, it's almost the same. Aha Hospital, it used to be 75,000 per 24 hours, but now it's over 1 crore. So 1 lakh, sorry, it's over 1 lakh now. So this MASH hospital, MASH? So they asked them to make the standard, and they said 1,10,000 for 24 hours. And there's hardly any ICU patient and hardly any anesthesia intensivist who is interested to treat the patient.
2.5 lakh per day.
2.5, they are increasing. And we decreased it. We started with the 10,000, then we decreased to 7,500. The patient, post-bypass patients, we are charging only 7,500. And we're giving them concession. Even at that, so they say, cardiologists say that we are charging too much. So, medically, we should have a director, medical director who should be in charge, should be intensivist also, junior doctors all the time, around the clock, depending on the beds, how many beds are occupied. Then nursing staff should have manager nurse, you should have a nurse specialist, you should have a nurse educator, you should have critical care nurse trainee. Because if you have got all these requirements, it should become a teaching intensive care unit. And people should be coming to get the training over here. So, then allied health services which are required in intensive care, physiotherapist, pharmacist, dietitian, respiratory therapist, technicians looking after the equipment, then social worker, secretary, ward clerk, and the sports staff. Sports staff mean ward boy and sweepers. How many people are involved? Right? So, according to the number of the patient, so this much equipment and this so many departments should be there collaborating with the intensive care unit. Staff area. There should be one staff area also. It should have a rest room, changing room, toilets, offices, doctors on call room, seminar and conference room, and cleaners room. This should be all in intensive care area. Right. So if you put all these there, so it needs quite a big space. Now, economics of ICU. Economics of ICU for humanity purpose, it's very essential part of the hospital. Now they are labeling it as a critical care units. And one of the critical care units is intensive care units. Other is neonatal intensive care units, NICU. Then the pediatric intensive care units, PICU. Then dialysis is also critical care units. Then accident emergency is also critical units. Then coronary care unit is also a critical care unit. This is one head. So usually in the modern hospital, all the critical units are just nearby, around in one place. So they are there almost, they are requiring each other's service. So easily approachable. There should not be wards in between or something like that. So nowadays they are keeping it like this, and they are all centrally placed. In all the hospital, from all the sites, it should be in the center. 8% of your hospital budget is spent on the intensive care unit. And a fixed cost, what is the budget? The fixed cost, that is the salaries of the person. We know how much we are spending on the intensive care unit. Then variable cost, that depends on admission and services rendered. That is variable, because it depends how many patients are there and what is being used. So how much is the disposable we are using? That is a separate cost. Now the variable cost in the private hospital is borne by the patient, and the fixed cost is borne by the hospital. Of course, they will have to generate the funds from the 8% of your hospital budget, then see how much you are saving on it. After looking at the services you are providing to the patient, it's nothing we are charging from the patient at Medicare hospital. So it's 10,000 is nothing. So if you got one bed, one patient, one nurse, and then the doctors around, and then you're providing all the services. So even oxygen cost now is increased. They have increased 4 times actually, because we are paying about 42 rupees. Now we are paying, or they have asked us to pay 150. तो कितने गुना हो गए? लकीली इस दफ़ा उन्होंने 65 पे हमें भेजा है बिल, फ्रॉम 42 to 65. वो कहने लगे अगर कोई नई मशीन नई लिक्विड ऑक्सीजन का प्लांट लगाएगा उसके लिए हुई 150. So a little bit of relief. And from oxygen, so we are again go into loss if we are not careful using it. And if you have got a flow meter, make it sure you have shut it down. There's a lot of oxygen being lost also that way. There is wastage. Levels of ICU in the terms of which hospital should have which level of ICU. Level 1 is the district hospital. Now this should have a closed nursing, should have ECG monitoring, should have provision for 24-hour ventilation, not more than that. in district hospital. This is according to our Pakistan standard, which have classified this. Level 2, that's the general hospital. You should have ECG, prolonged ventilation. You should have access to radiology, pathology, and physiotherapy. That's level 2. Level 3 is the tertiary hospital, as Nishtar Hospital, Multan. It is a referral unit, should have a specialist intensivist, critical care nurses, and the support of complex investigation also. So it's like this: district hospital, then bigger general hospital, then you got tertiary hospital like Nishtar Hospital. Now, who should be in charge? The only one word we use is should be intensivist. Who is the intensivist? Anesthetist plus training in anesthesia, whether here or abroad, and should have intensive care interest and has undergone the training of intensive care. Or other choices, any physician can become intensivist. Physician or surgeon should have at least 2 years of anesthesia training, should have training in ICU, and should have specialization in ICU also, and should have training in why the anesthetist being chosen. Why? Because postgraduate training is based on the anesthetist. Postgraduate training is based on advanced physiology, advanced pharmacology, advanced technology. None of the specialties, they undergo this type of training, because we are treating the patient at a cell level, and we are using large amount of equipment also. We are not only using the large equipment, we should know the basic principle of equipment also. We should know how to operate those equipment also. We should know how to interpret the result of those equipment also. So this is only an anesthetist who does it. Even the other respiratory physician, other things, they don't know these things. Advanced physiology, advanced pharmacology, advanced technology. Then they are accustomed to dealing with different consultants, because anesthesia specialty is such. Sometimes the cardiac surgeon is coming, sometimes the general surgeon is coming, sometimes the gynecologist is coming. So like this, so they are used to dealing with different type of different specialists, consultants. So here also in intensive care units, all type of patients are coming. So the best person who can deal with it is anesthetist. Then used to decide conflicts. Wherever there is a conflict within different specialists, is the anesthetist who has got casting vote, and he decides what is the best for the patient in theaters. Then used to concentrate on individuals. Anesthetists concentrate on individual patient, not en masse, not on OPD, not in whole of the ward, but they concentrate on individual patients. When we are anesthetizing, we are concentrating one patient on the table, not at a time so many patients. So this is their training. And no outpatient commitments. Anesthetists don't do the outpatient, so they are free. They have got more time to look after the intensive care unit. Then they are used to rapid decision making and act upon it. This is our training. When we are anesthetizing the patient, we'll have to take the quick decision. ये नहीं होगा कि आप इसको बच्चे छोड़ दें, आधा घंटे सर कल किसी और को आने तो उससे पूछ लेंगे. तो जब कहते हैं कंसल्टेंट बन जाते हैं आप, it means you are independent to take the decision, and should be quick decision, because you are playing with the life of the patient. When the patient is on the table, if an emergency arises, as it happened other day also, the patient who had tracheostomy and was operated by the facial-maxillary surgeon, and the other day he started bleeding in the room, and he was brought to intensive care unit, and Dr. Amar, he opened the tracheostomy and saved his life. Otherwise, he would have died. It was very quick decision also. You have to take the decision. Same way, we had the patient from the cath lab also, and we had to put on the ventilator also. It was a very quick decision. It was his decision also that he put on ventilator, and in the morning we took him off the ventilator also. So this is the job of the anesthetist. So that's why we are the best candidate to become the intensivist and to become the in charge of unit. Why we need the monitoring so much? Because there is a variable response, variable physiological response to the disease. Such a patient is admitted there. Secondly, the patients are suffering from multiple organ involvement. They have multiple organ disease. They've got liver problem, they've got lung problem, they've got the renal problem, and then they've got a brain problem also. Very rarely they've got the gut problem also. So there is a multiple organ involvement. So we have to, we are involved in that. For that we need monitoring to give the precise, to make the precise diagnosis and precise treatment. Then we are giving continuous pharmacotherapy, continuous infusion of the drugs. For that we need the very efficient monitoring system also. We have to see, because when you're giving inotropic agent, we are giving vasopressor drugs, we are giving vasodilator drugs. So we need to know what is the continuous blood pressure monitoring and ECG. So for that purpose we need so much monitoring. Then there is a close observation needs precision, because that's why one nurse is sitting there and she's documenting hourly, but she's looking at that continuously, because we need precise monitoring of the patient, precise information, so that we should take the action on it. Why do we monitor? What do we monitor? We monitor different systems of the body: cardiovascular system, respiratory system, renal system, brain, gastrointestinal tract, and hematopoiesis. All these systems are monitored at a time in a multiple organ failure patient who is in intensive care unit. Right? We can't say like that, no, we should ignore it. We cannot ignore it. That's why it's expensive. Lab cost is very much on the patient in a private hospital. So there is routinely, there are about 28 tests should be done on every patient who is in intensive care unit. We are only doing 10, 15. We are not completely doing all the tests, so it should be 28. Now, normalization of cell. When we say in intensive care unit, we normalize the physiology of a cell. What does it mean? We try to bring the person, we try to normalize the hydration of the cell. उसमें पानी की adequate amount होनी चाहिए. For that purpose, we'll have to bring the patient to water balance, then electrolyte balance, then acid-base balance, then nutritional balance. They go in the same sequence. Water and electrolyte go side by side. Water and electrolyte balance first, then acid-base balance, then we bring into nutritional balance. If you don't bring the patient into water and electrolyte balance, so you will not be able to correct the acid-base disturbance. Until unless you bring the body into water, electrolyte, and acid-base balance, you cannot give the proper nutrition, and nutrition will not go to its final station, which is mitochondria. Then it will be wasted. It will disturb everything. So they go in the same sequence. Now, systemic diseases upset the above balances. तो मैं तो इसीलिए कहता हूँ, when the physicians finish, then we start our intensive therapy. So हमारे अपने में लाइन है दरमियान में. We support systems till the cells are normalized, right? While waiting for the cell to be normalized physiologically, we support the system. There are 6 systems in the body: brain, cardiovascular system, cardiovascular and respiratory system are the primary system. Then 4 secondary system: brain, liver, gut, and kidney. ठीक? तो ये 4 चीज़ें डिपेंडेंट हैं ऑन कार्डियोवास्कुलर एंड रेस्पिरेटरी सिस्टम. तो इन 6 सिस्टम को हम करते हैं. वी हैव गॉट नथिंग टू डू विद द मसल, वी हैव नथिंग टू डू विद द बोन, राइट? So when we are treating the patient in intensive care unit. Now, cardiovascular hemodynamics. Now, look at the cardiac output. Roughly, normal cardiac output is, in a normal person, 5 liters per minute. The cardiac index is 3 liter per minute per square meter. Per square meter is how much is your per square meter area? कितना है आप लोगों का? कितना है सरफेस एरिया? डिपेंड करता है साइज में छोटे बड़े पे, लेकिन एवरेज कितना है? व्हाट इज द सरफेस एरिया? 1.7 square meter is your surface area. If you divide this cardiac output, इस पे डिवाइड कर दें, it becomes cardiac index, right? So if the cardiac output is 5 liter, so then the cardiac index is 3.2 liter per minute per square meter. Right? Then pulmonary capillary wedge pressure is 5 to 10 millimeter of mercury. Central venous pressure is 6 to 12 millimeter of mercury. Blood pressure normally we take is 120 by 80. It's very difficult to get this blood pressure. नर्सेज का अराउंड अबाउट 100 होता है, 100 बाई 50 सीसी कहते हैं, हमारा तो नॉर्मली है, कितना है 100 है. डॉक्टर का 150 पे पहुँच जाता है, कहते हैं कि 120 वाली ढूंढनी बड़ा मुश्किल है. देन स्ट्रोक इंडेक्स इज कार्डिक इंडेक्स डिवाइडेड बाई रेट पर बीट. आप कार्डिक इंडेक्स को करें, अगर आप टोटल कार्डिक आउटपुट करें दैट इज स्ट्रोक वॉल्यूम. स्ट्रोक वॉल्यूम इज कार्डिक आउटपुट डिवाइडेड बाई रेट. So it becomes like this. These parameters has to be monitored before we say that we are monitoring the hemodynamics of a patient, right? Then respiratory system mechanics, total lung capacity, and then functional residual capacity, then inspiratory capacity, expiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, then minute volume, alveolar ventilation, dead space ventilation, peak inspiratory pressure. All these things, when the patient has got a respiratory problem, these things are monitored in ICU all the time. Every component of this system has got its own importance. किसी की कमी हो जाए, ज़्यादती हो जाए, you should try to find the reason why it is happening like that. That is a close monitoring and closed action you take on an individual patient. In addition to that, there are ventilatory parameters we look at that. That is, what is the plateau pressure, what is the peak inspiratory pressure, what is the dead space, and what is the compliance, what is the resistance, how is the loops look like. All these things you have to monitor if a patient is on a ventilator. Now, pulmonary admitted patient. What type of commonly patients are admitted to the ICU? Acute respiratory failure, acute lung injury, then ARDS patient, adult respiratory distress syndrome, then MODS, multiple organ dysfunction syndromes, or head injury, metabolic diseases, then multiple trauma, eclampsia, GB syndrome, poisoning, tetanus. So these are commonly patients who come to intensive care, any intensive care unit. And in addition to this poisoning, we get ये क्या होते हैं, organophosphorus poisoning, काला पत्थर. In relation to oxygen, we should be monitoring these parameters also. That oxygen content, arterial oxygen content, venous oxygen content, take the difference. That will be VO2, how much oxygen has been taken by the cell. Then we look at the result, whether it is oxygen being utilized by the cell or not. Then we look at the lactate. That will give you the information that the oxygen you are giving is useful. Then your CVO2, oxygen content of the venous blood. Then P big AO2, that is partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli. Then AA gradient. You look at the partial pressure of oxygen in the alveoli, then you look at the partial pressure of oxygen in the arterial blood and take their difference. That will tell you the status of alveolar capillary pathway. Oxygen is reaching in the alveoli, if P big AO2 is good, but it's not reaching the blood, it means the alveolar capillary pathway has got some problem. That is intra-alveolar space, might be edema there, then epithelium of the alveoli, then interstitial space, then the endothelium of capillary, then the plasma, then the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve. You look at that, what mood is the oxygen dissociation curve? Is it shifted to the right or to the left? Then you go further down towards the cell, then you measure the DO2, delivery of oxygen to the tissues, and then you look at the VO2, how much has been extracted. Then we have seen whether extracted oxygen being utilized or not. Then you look at the lactate. Then we say you have analyzed the oxygenation status of a patient. Then you look at the PCO2, what is the partial pressure of oxygen and partial pressure of carbon dioxide in the blood. Then end-tidal CO2 also. Then you look at their difference also. Why the difference is increasing or decreasing. Then you try to analyze it and try to find the cause. That's how we look at it when the patient is admitted to ICU, has got some respiratory problem. Then we look at the ratio PaO2, partial fraction of oxygen in the arterial blood, divided by FiO2, fractional inspired oxygen concentration, and that gives us very good oxygen index. Then look at the theoretical maximum CO2 at known FiO2. Then you look at the shunting. Blood is coming into the lung, but it's not coming in contact with the gases and just bypassing it. So that's according to the shunt equation. So CCO2 minus CO2 over CCO2 minus CVO2. And normally it is a 5 to 8% is the shunt. If the shunt is increasing, they'll have to find it out. What's the problem? Is there any pulmonary vasoconstriction, or if there is other problem? Now, I'll stop it here. On the next lecture, we'll start from there.